For being here, Jay. This is going to be a great session. I'm glad you all are here. We've got an accomplished, illustrious, experienced group, and this is going to be a good session. So I'd like you to put on your operators hats, and let's just assume that you are all part of a management team that was just acquired by private equity. It was a founder-led business, and you, as managers who had been reporting to the founder, have breathed a big sigh of relief because the ink is still wet on the transaction. There's going to be a nice celebratory dinner tonight. There'll be some champagne toasts. Everybody's in a good mood. And tomorrow you're going to go into the office and you're going to say, "Phew, gosh, all that crazy private equity nonsense, all that diligence, all those probing and prodding and poking questions, those PE guys will go back to New York and we can get back to business as usual, right?" So in reality, things don't work that way, but in many cases, the management teams that had been working for a founder or a family owner, they assume that what was acquired was good and that the private equity group acquired the past, right? Private equity doesn't acquire the past, they acquire hopes and aspirations for the future. So, do they really have the leadership capability that the private equity group thinks they have? That's the question of the day or the question of the hour. How do we avoid assuming that the management team is ready just because the deal has closed? So we want to make sure that the leadership team is future ready. So I'm going to transition over to Jay. Jay, I know you've been studying and working with leadership teams on exactly this challenge for some time now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what being future ready means and why it is so critical, especially in a private equity context?
So, excuse me, when you think about future readiness, I define it as the capability of a leadership team and board in their organization to consistently, number one, anticipate, two, adapt, and three, act effectively amid uncertainty, disruption, and change before circumstances force a response. And that before is really important because if you're forced to react, you're already behind. And when you think about this idea of future readiness, you need some new capabilities because for most of us, what got us to where we are today isn't going to get us to where we want to be. Things have changed. It's different than how we've led in the past, what we might have learned in business school, what have we might have learned in our corporate or last company experience. So new capabilities are needed. And I've developed this model called the Five Leadership Superpowers. The superpowers look at five tensions that leaders and boards and leadership teams need to manage. And with these tensions, where I'd say a lot of us tend to say, I can do this or I can do that, each of these tensions require both and thinking. So if you think about the tensions, the first one is present versus future. So I combine those and it's about being a present futurist. And I'll define each of these in a moment. Same thing with experienced learner, prepared risk taker, strategic executor, and accountable collaborator. I'm going to go through each one, define it a little bit, and talk about, kind of raise a question that I'd say is relevant for PE firms, for PE operators, for operating partners. So the first one is being a present futurist. So what does a present futurist do? They understand the present. That means they're talking to different stakeholders, customers, employees. They are paying attention to what's going on in the world around them. At the same time, they're thinking about and anticipating the future. How do you do that? You track trends, you watch out for early warning signals, you think through different scenarios, and you integrate the present and future together to inform decision making. And the question I pose to the leaders out there, are we over focusing on the present at the expense of the future? I've had executives say to me, "Oh, I'm so busy fighting fires. I just don't have time. When things calm down, then I can think about the future." Well, if you're waiting for things to calm down, you're going to be waiting a long time. And if and when it does happen, you're going to be late because you haven't been doing this all along. The next one is being an experienced learner. An experienced learner leverages but challenges their own experience. The thing is, what we did before may or may not be relevant in our new position heading up this operating company. So it's okay to challenge that. It's about being curious and open to ideas. It's about encouraging debate amongst your leadership team. So everybody has an opportunity to contribute and we're not missing viewpoints and having blind spots. And it's about fostering continuous learning. So again, if you go back to your operating company, is continuous learning and development fostered and enabled? I was reviewing the 2025 annual PE study that Alex Partners ran, and they talked about how leadership effectiveness and alignment is the number one driver of value. So this is an important issue. And then is there a learning culture or a blame culture? And what I mean by that, do we learn from our experiences or do we try and point the finger and say who's guilty? And learning, I'd say for the most part, is far more effective. Next is being a prepared risk taker. A prepared risk taker navigates risk strategically. Risk is a part of doing business. Whether you act or don't act, there's risk. Very often there's a risk aversion. And if you think, okay, I'm not going to do anything right now, it feels too risky. Inaction has its own set of risks, sometimes worse. It's about balancing that boldness that you have to want to grow, to disrupt the market, but being pragmatic at the same time. It's about being holistically risk aware. So, not just thinking about risk as isolated incidents, but thinking about that range of risk, how they're interconnected. How one thing, for example, the barge got stuck in the Suez Canal, and I said to myself, that's way, that's 6,000 miles away. It's not going to affect me here in Atlanta. And all of a sudden, you saw that ripple effect with supply chain. And it's about developing a posture of preparedness. So thinking about, if things start to go wrong, if there's a disruption, do we have contingency plans? Have we thought about basic preparation? I did work with a supermarket chain in the Southeast. They were largely based in Florida. They had a playbook for hurricanes. So they knew exactly what they needed to do. Think about what playbooks we should have in case of an emergency, a competitor business model change that obliterates ours. How do we look for and prepare for these things? So, two questions. Is your leadership team taking a holistic approach to risk? Are you looking not just at things like a cyber breach or a burning building down or a supplier going out of business? But what about the competitors? What about what's going on in the market? What about things outside of the industry that could influence how your industry works? And how does leadership balance those bold moves with that posture of preparedness? These are questions you need to be asking yourself. Fourth is being a strategic executor. How do you make sure that strategy and execution are integrated? If they're separate, that path to value is going to be a lot slower than if strategy is actually operationalized by the choices you make, the investments you make, the initiatives you work on. It's about being able to move between strategy and operations. If all you do is spend 100% of your time in operations and you're not thinking about strategy and how you might need to adapt, you're going to be really busy. But are you going someplace? And if all you do is think about strategy and you don't execute, you're not creating value, which is so critical. And in times of turbulence like these, we need to adaptively manage. One of the terms I like to use is disciplined adaptability. And with disciplined adaptability, there's discipline about why we're here. What's the value we're supposed to create? What's the values and culture we have as an organization? But how we execute, that's how we need to adapt. How we learn and what we learn, we might need to adjust. So the questions here is, how well does leadership connect strategic vision with operational reality? And that's not just in conversations within the organization, within the employees, but it's also making sure that's being conveyed to your operating partner and to your board. And how well does leadership in the board provide guidance on, encourage, and oversee adaptive strategy management? Everybody has a great plan and a great timeline in the beginning. But 9 times out of 10, that doesn't hold, because something is changing, something's evolving, an individual maybe isn't working, or a leadership team isn't coming together. You need to have that flexibility. The fifth superpower is being an accountable collaborator. Most of the challenges we face requires we work and collaborate across organizational boundaries. No silos anymore. How do we work with our partners, our vendors? And how do we make sure the teams, whether that's our operating company leadership team or different project teams, are fit for purpose? What is it we're trying to deliver and fit for the future? And how do we enable and empower teams to be autonomous so they don't have to be micromanaged? And it's about holding teams accountable for outcomes, the results, the value that's supposed to be delivered. So, questions. Does the leadership team act as a team? Do they foster and enable collaboration across the organization? And is the team accountable for results? Because when I think about it, strategy is a team sport. You can't do it by yourself. Sales has to help marketing. IT has to help marketing and sales. I mean, everybody's going to work together. So let me just pause there for a second before I just share a quick case. Kit, any questions, anything from the audience at this point?
Sorry, I was wanting to ask if you could use the 5 superpowers in organizational due diligence.
Absolutely. When you think about organizational due diligence, the last thing you want to do is be surprised. You want to understand the leadership team you're buying, the culture you're walking into, the dynamics of the team. To the extent you can get that information and ask yourself, do these people have the superpowers? Are they forward thinking? Are they open to learning? Are they willing to take the necessary risks to grow the business and do so prudently? Is there a strategy, and have they shown the ability to operationalize it? So I think it's a great way one to assess the organization and the leaders up front. It's also important as you're thinking about building out an executive team, if you've had some departures, to use the superpowers as a bit of a screen for the folks you want to hire, the folks you want to develop, and for succession planning as well.
All right. Thanks, Jay. If you have a question, you can use your raise the hand icon, or you could put it into the chat, whatever you prefer. Anybody? Okay.
Did someone have a question? Because I can't see everybody right now.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'll let you know, Jay.
Okay, so let's just talk about a case, and this is meant to be illustrative. So we have a PE-backed manufacturing firm. They were recently acquired. They're a mid-sized industrial manufacturer facing stalled growth, supply chain breakdowns, and a misaligned executive team. The CEO is lacking buy-in from functional leads, and the board is losing confidence in the management team. And there's a risk of delay in their value creation plan. So where do the superpowers come in? Well, being a present futurist, the CEO and COO co-created a 12-month future-focused operating vision tied to key investor metrics, aligning the leadership team around shared priorities and a unified forward view. Being an experienced learner, the leaders reviewed past initiatives. They invited shop floor and customer feedback and used that to change course on 2 flawed projects, building trust and fostering a culture of accountability. So you see experienced learner and accountable collaborator work together. As a prepared risk taker, they looked at their suppliers and they made a bold call around rationalizing their products within 60 days, accepting a short-term disruption to unlock EBITDA gains and margin improvement. Around strategy execution, that whole cadence became agile. They had weekly cross-functional sprints, monthly strategy reviews, cutting decision time by 40% and accelerating outcomes. That's something you need to actively manage and monitor. And in being an accountable collaborator, the CEO built stronger relationships with each member of his team, but also facilitating how the team needed to work together and identifying what kind of behaviors they were looking for. And the CEO, in speaking with one of his advisors, started to understand that if he tolerated or she tolerated poor behavior, don't be surprised if other people do that. So it's maintaining that discipline. Now, if you think about it, in this result, they increased EBITDA much faster. Their executive team was now working better together, and you didn't have executive team turnover. The board was supportive because the CEO was proving what they could do with their team. And the exit timeline, which looked like it was going to get delayed, is now reset because they've applied these superpowers to get things back on track, more future forward thinking, and much more aware. So, I mean, that's just an example how the 5 superpowers can work together, and they support and reinforce one another. Each of the superpowers is connected. Present futurist informs prepared risk taker and strategic executor. Experienced learner enables strategy execution. So they're not just individual, but what you have is the power of five. It helps in terms of benefits, excuse me, about better understanding of the environment, how it's changing, building the critical capabilities you need to succeed. And when you think about disruption, if you're future ready, you're not going to be caught off guard. You're not going to be surprised. And that dampens your downside risk. And because you're able to recover faster, it amplifies your upside opportunity. From a leadership team perspective, there's better clarity and direction. Everyone's going in the same direction. The board and the executive team are aligned. You have better risk foresight and signal detection and agility and adaptability. Those are the qualities you want on your operating executive team. And that's what PE firms are looking for. So when you're doing this, who wins when you're future ready? I'm just having a little bit of delay with my computer here. So customers win because they're better understood and better served. Employees, this becomes a better place to work. They understand the strategy, the bigger purpose, the role they play. And because they're enabled and they're learning, they're committed, and you don't have the turnover. Partners you work with, whether that be your PE partners, suppliers, other advisors, and people you work with. Society in the sense of, are we being good corporate citizens? And lastly, well, it's last, but most importantly, let's see, shareholders. Because if all these constituencies are being served, if customers are happy, employees are being productive, your partners are working with you, not against you, shareholders are going to win. So there's that connection. You can't, well, people sometimes think, it's all about the shareholder. It's all about the shareholder. You got to remember what happens to deliver those results. We talked about where the superpowers apply. We spoke about organizational due diligence. Think about leadership and capability development. Those are important because your leaders need new capabilities. So are you investing in that? Are you giving people stretch assignments? Are you coaching and mentoring? We talked about hiring key executives. It can also be part of their onboarding to help them think from a future ready perspective. Succession planning, we touched on a little bit. Execution challenges, we talked about in the case. It also comes down to exit planning. I think the key thing here, when you're going to sell the company, somebody's going to buy it because of its long-term value. So do you have a narrative that explains how you've created and the opportunities to create more long-term value? The better the narrative, the better the valuation. So steps you can take today, and I'll share some of this in the chat in a moment so we can open up for questions. And, Kit, I'm sure you have a few. The first thing is, how can you find out if you're a future ready leader? Well, if you scan this QR code, I have a free online assessment. It takes 5 to 8 minutes to complete, and you'll get a sense of, are you a future ready leader and what dimensions you need to work on. You get feedback instantly, and you'll also be able to schedule a call with me to discuss your results. The second thing you can do is learn. I have a self-paced online course, Becoming a Future Ready Leader with the 5 Leadership Superpowers. It takes probably 2 to 3 hours to complete, more time if you actually apply the exercises in your business. but that will give you a much deeper dive versus a taste test you got today. In each of the superpowers, how you apply them, questions you ask, what you should be thinking about. And lastly, it's about planning. So you have an opportunity again. This is a complimentary 30-minute future readiness consult, and that links to my calendar. And we can have that discussion you've been wanting to have. We can talk about where you are and what the next steps are. And I encourage you to reach out to me. You've got my email there and you've got my LinkedIn information. So please do connect. So if we think about what we went through today, we know disruption and uncertainty are normal. I see the question about getting the slides, and yes, I'll provide a handout. So you will get copies of the slides. Why future readiness is important, what the 5 leadership superpowers are in action and the value they provide, where to apply the superpowers in the deal life cycle, which we've touched upon, and steps to take to become future ready. So the key here is to act today or risk being behind tomorrow. And being behind is not a place you want to be in this environment. So let me open it up for questions. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody.
All right. I don't see any questions in the chat, other than the one about the slides. Anybody have any questions they want to share here? Yeah, Abby.
Sorry, I was trying to find the raised hand in the reactions. I'm curious, when you're looking at the 5 leadership superpowers for a company, where you have gaps, do you find it's most helpful to hire those gaps or to try to develop existing team members to fill those gaps?
I think it's a combination of the two. You want somebody, let's put it this way, if you can develop it on your team, it's better off because you don't have the ramp up of somebody new coming into the company, having to learn the culture, having the relationships with the other people. Now, having said that, if you're completely missing that person and you need that other expertise, you want to make sure they fit and at the same time bring that capability in. Just bringing the capability in, if they don't fit, you're putting yourself in another bad situation.
And then I have a follow-up. Is there like an assessment that you can give to the leadership team to figure out how they might fit into those 5 leadership superpowers?
So the assessment I spoke about is an individual assessment. I also have a team assessment that can be given to boards or leadership teams. So I think it's good to look at both dimensions. What I think is ideal, an individual leader, I would say, should be proficient in 1 to 3 of the superpowers and appreciate the others. When it comes to a board, you want to, or a leadership team, you want all 5. Now that can be spread amongst different people, but that way those questions are asked, they're brought up in discussion, and it eliminates blind spots and it just becomes part of the mindset of the organization.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I've got one, but I want to defer to you all. Anybody have a question you want to pose? All right, well, I'll dive in. So some of you know I'm doing some consulting work now with Steve Cliff, one of our operators, a former operating partner. And so Steve and I are helping create alignment inside first-time PE-backed organizations. As I mentioned earlier, in many cases, the management team just kind of wants to continue business as usual, the way things had been run. And the private equity group, of course, everything that is in the investment thesis and the value creation plan involves change or new or better or enter or fix or whatever. So change is hard for humans. And what we're trying to do is trying to create that skill in leadership teams, the skill of change management, change ability. So Jay, I just wanted to ask you, is there something that you can do to spot or fix the misalignment that I'm talking about early? Is there something that we as a consulting organization should be doing to take advantage of your capability?
You know, when you start, misalignment can mean so many things. Alignment within the executive team, alignment between functions and the enterprise, uh, individual alignment. Do I understand how my role fits in the organization? And instead of talking about alignment in an abstract way, I think the superpowers provide a lens around which people can align. Thinking about, are we developing a shared view of what that future looks like? Now, let me take that back. Are we developing a shared view of where we want to go, what that future state is going to look like, so we have a common understanding of what we're working towards? Are we building capabilities that enable us to have a more effective and productive conversation? The superpowers provides a common language to do that and to shape discussions. So that's just two examples.
Yep. Thank you.
Kit, if I could just jump in now as well. Um, a strategy that I've utilized before, post post acquisition, as part of an integration plan, and I bring in other operators to help deliver the engagement with post acquisition for the integration. But one of the things we've found in the past that can be meaningful, but it's against the kind of DNA of what you're talking about, Kit. So it can be challenging, especially with timelines and part of the plan that you've got in place, but or want to execute. Is sometimes it's meaningful to allow a natural cadence to happen where you're going, hey, we don't make too much change in the first 6 months or Q1 or Q2 or in the first Q. Can we put together some sort of feedback loop or some way we can start to talk and listen to each other? And I know that doesn't always work and it's not comfortable as well, right? But because we always want to go, hey, we've acquired, we've got the KPIs or whatever else, the metrics we've targeted ourselves to achieve, and there may be a lot of organizational change as part of it as well. But what has been meaningful, but I'm not suggesting it always works, is the case of you go, how about we just, hit pause and learn about each other in a more organic manner, perhaps don't affect too much change initially, but somehow capture the conversations and the new dialogue and the new learnings that are happening, which goes back to some of Jay's continuous learning stuff. Again, I'm just sharing because that has been effective for us. But this is, private market companies, not public listed companies, not in the public market space, and I'm uncertain whether that would make a difference. But I just thought it could be of some worthy consideration as well, Kit and team.
So,
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead. I'll let you go first, and then I'll comment.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge what David was saying, but also to push back gently just a little bit, because
Right.
in our community, we often talk about when you're starting out in private equity or you've just landed in a PE-backed role, you sort of have to jump into the deep end, start swimming fast, and while you're swimming fast in the fast lane, look around and observe, take notes, compare notes with everybody else, but you're still swimming fast. So it's a tough job, but I just wanted to throw that out there. No need to reply. Jay, over to you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Kit.
So, David, one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking, first of all, if you look at the superpowers as part of your due diligence, you've
Right.
done some of that early learning, so you're able to have a quicker start. On the other hand, if you've not done you know, more comprehensive due diligence when it comes to human capital and leadership. You need to do that quickly. You know, once the deal is closed, you want to assess your team, get the right people in the right places. You know, driving that alignment. There's a little bit of this go slow to go fast, and I think it's worth that investment of time, because if you don't address those issues early, they'll bubble up later, and that'll lead to turnover and things breaking down along the way. Why not be a little preemptive and preventative to address those issues?
Jay, just to add, and I'm not trying to protect my opinion. No. I mean, due diligence has to be done, and it has to be done extensively, right? We need to know what the lay of the land is. I'm saying in certain instances, I'm not saying it's necessarily always the case. That's the thesis, but in certain instances, we've done the due diligence. We know what the good organizational framework what is, the vendors, the suppliers, the rest of the ecosystem, etc. But in there's been instances when we affected change at a slower rate because we felt that that would help the cultural DNA and the integration process. Because you may be acquiring from, and the company that's acquiring may have an aggressive strategic framework, but the company that you may be acquiring, that you are acquiring, may be a slow mover, and then that it can become across as being a bit abrasive. So I'm just saying it can be meaningful, but it's not always a given. I'm not suggesting it's a playbook that needs to be embraced always. So
Dave, I agree with you. Well, there's an element of a race, in terms of value and timeline. You don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face.
right.
And taking again the time up front to do that. Each organization is going to be a little different in terms of what's their change capacity.
Right.
So setting that, getting the cultural alignment. I mean, especially if your organization is rolling up other businesses, that culture piece is so important to make sure there's that alignment up front. And in making the investment, as I like to say, very often we have a tendency, okay, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Don't confuse activity with progress. Sometimes less activity leads to more progress. So, I think you're raising a really good point.
Thanks, gents. Thank you. Thanks, team.
All right. Other questions? We've got a few minutes left, so I'll throw one out there naively. When you do organizational due diligence, Jay, how do you present it in a way that, like, if you end up talking to the C-level, the top tier of management, I think that is fair game because it's due diligence, and the management team is going to have you as the acquirer or as the service provider for the acquirer, you have access to the top tier of management. But what about tier 2 management? How do you present organizational due diligence when you're doing surveys or assessments of tier 2?
So I think there's an element of, think about it as a capability audit. It's less of a test and more of a mirror. So leaders start to understand, where they are and who are the people you're going to be working with. So think about it as it's preparation for the future. And I think it's not that that there's one right answer. You're trying to get, under the covers, you kind of want to open up their heads a little bit and understand how people think, how people operate, because there's going to be change. So asking for, how they've handled disruptions over the last couple of years. What have they learned through their experience? That will show you whether or not they're open-minded, how they think in terms of, where do they think the industry is going? Listen to what they say and listen to how they're getting their information. I think that's really the important piece. So it's not like a psychological test. It's not looking at traits. You want to see how people think, so through those probing questions, I think you get a lot of insight.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Jay.
Hey,
Okay, well,
I've got
start
a
to
quick
wrap up.
question.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
So you mentioned these 5 traits, and I know coming out of a lot of kind of big, huge corporate America organizations, DISC, Enneagram, Hogan, Myers-Briggs, and the list goes on from there, Berkman. Those are all assessments that I've used in my career. So it's interesting. How would you tee those up in regards to PE? Are those also instruments and tools that are used on the change management organizational side of building teams?
So I think this model is much more behavior based. It's much more pragmatic and actionable. If you think about those other assessments, they're not tied to strategy. They're not tied to the future. They're not tied to leading in a disruptive, uncertain environment. They're looking at traits, but can you make that leap to action and results? So I think that's where the difference is. It doesn't mean that you don't do those. There might be some of those you want to do, but this covers an area that specifically addresses how do I lead in times of uncertainty and change. It's very much strategy and execution based. It's a holistic approach, looking at the organization, looking at strategy, looking at operations and leadership and how those 4 parts work together. And I don't think you get that as much from the other assessments.
Okay, interesting. There's just so many tools that can be deployed, right? And I've participated in all of those that I just named in various different leadership role capacities to identify, are there gaps? And then where do you have the strongest drivers, dot connectors, all of those things, risk takers, innovators, etc. So I don't know if anybody's ever looked at all of these instruments collectively across the board to say, hey, the best leaders score this on a DISC or score this on a Myers-Briggs or a Hogan and so on and so forth. It's kind of interesting as we think about change in people.
Sure. No, absolutely. I don't know if Michael Van Imp is still on. But Michael, if you are, I'd like to get your perspective on this, because Michael's been in executive search, board search, leadership advisory, but I don't know if he's still on.
Yes, I'm
He
still.
is. Yeah, go.
So Heather, please, can you summarize your question?
Yes, so I was just curious as to there's so many personality and leadership style assessments out in the market. And I'm going to pick on DISC because DISC has come up a couple times in discussions I've had this week. DISC, Strength Finders, Enneagram, Hogan. I've done all of those as an IT leader in my career with my counterparts, my peers, and my leaders. And we tend to ensure that we have the aspects of all personality types on the team. And if not, how do we try to fill in the gaps? That's how I've usually used these tools in the past. So I'm curious as to, in the PE, because I don't have PE experience, in the PE world, when it's all about, and I completely agree, strategy has to be executed to drive the outcomes. Are these other assessments coming into play in the PE world?
Yes, they do. Obviously, it depends on the assessors and the assessing team on how you want to use those. For instance, I use a lot Hogan because Hogan is one of the most rich instruments. is one of the most solid ones. Disk is okay. Discovery, all the color ones, then MBTI with the letter codes. They help to create a language that you can use with your team and that people understand, right? So it's a common language, and it helps people to understand their individual differences and how you as a team work together. I think with instruments like Hogan, you can go much deeper. You can link them to specific competencies you would look for in that specific target company that you want to invest into as part of your portfolio, right? I think the benefit of Jay's tool is, of course, that it's very specific. And you could combine them. It could be another layer of data points that you look at to see how this team will perform in the future and what you're expecting from them, but also what is kind of the development they might need, or do you need to upgrade some of the talent, swap some of the talent because there's some gaps in there. So those tools can help you with multiple data points, bring it together, consolidate it, and that will give you a more accurate picture.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. So Jay, have you put into the chat ways that people get in touch with you, or have you saved the chat yourself? Do you want me to tell you how to do that?
Yeah, so I just put in the links again
Okay,
for Are You a Future Ready Leader, the course, and how to schedule time with me, and also my email should be in there as well. And I've got my email. If you just look at my picture, where it says my name, it's got my email there as well. I want to talk to the folks that are on the line and understand some of the challenges that they're facing, because this isn't a one size fits all. It's what's right for you in your circumstances, in your context, in your business. And I think that's the beauty of the superpowers, is it's how does it fit and how does it apply in your circumstances? If you're somebody who's in the railroad business versus someone who's in the SaaS business, how you use the superpowers and the urgency is going to be very different.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I appreciate everyone's time. Kit, thanks for this opportunity to connect with folks.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Thanks for being here. Thanks everybody for attending. Dennis, we haven't met, but if you'd like to learn more about the operators, you're free to check us out. Love to have you as a member there. I see the Army background, and you mentioned I think it was Microsoft. So awesome.
So, Kit, how do I get to? You said say that one more time. I missed it.
I don't know whether you have prior private equity experience, but the website is theoperators.pe, as in private equity. And thanks, Becky, for being here. Thanks, Mike. And Jay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm sorry, Kit, one more time.
Yeah, I'll just put it into the chat.
Okay.
The operators .pe.
Got it.
So one of the things that we do is help people that are in career transition mode, land roles in private equity. But
okay.
Oh, I didn't realize you were a football player as well. Not only did you attend West Point, which you played on the football team, huh?
I did a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic. Well, Jay, thanks again. Appreciate you leading the session. And if you need anything from me, feel free to reach back out.
Wait, you'll send me the video when you have a chance.
I will. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.